Bombshells.
Hey everyone, it's Sonia here. Breaking news, Anthony Fauci is not the most honest person in America. Yeah, his emails have been now revealed to the world, and it turns out that he knew a lot more than he let on. So here's what happened. BuzzFeed obtained over 3,000 emails that belong to Fauci through a Freedom of Information Act request. And they discussed the content here on an article. Well, now those emails are available publicly on this document cloud, and anyone can go and look at them. So people have been sorting through this and discovering all kinds of things. We're going to go through this information, and, well, I guess you'll make up your mind after what it means. Before I start, I want to say thank you for liking the video and for leaving me a comment below. Thank you for your support on Patreon, which does help keep my channel going. And also, please check out the link below for C60 EVO. This is fullerene, also known as carbon-60, which has been called a Nobel Prize winning molecule. It's a super antioxidant that actually helps your body produce more of four kinds of antioxidants naturally. This is a powerful anti-aging supplement. It leads to decreased inflammation, improved energy, and improved sleep. It's my personal favorite. I actually use this. I think it's like the best thing I've ever found. So that's why I'm here letting you know about it. And if you go check out the link below, you'll get more info, and you will also get a discount if you use the code. So these emails were revealed to the world, and Anthony Fauci's emails relieved the pressure that fell on one man. That's how they framed it. Oh, so much pressure. Having to keep Americans calm and develop an effective strategy despite conflicts with the Trump administration. Yeah, well, what's questionable is that he wasn't really honest. And his take on it influenced public policy and influenced the media. It influenced, social media and what people were allowed or were not allowed to say. That's the part that I guess really burns my ass. This was a developing story, and it was like we weren't even allowed to actually have a discussion about what was happening. Some of the things that came up here were, the issue of masks. He had said on 60 Minutes that there was no point in healthy people wearing masks. It was only useful for healthcare personnel and people who were sick. After meeting with the Trilateral Commission, apparently, according to his emails, he changed his tune and said, everyone should wear masks. You should even maybe wear two. I mean, why stop at one? If one is good, two is even better. Now, I don't know if that was anything to do with his meeting with the Trilateral Commission, but there's only two possibilities. Either he was not being honest in the first place when he said people didn't need masks, and that was because he didn't want the public to be alarmed about not being able to get them, because he wanted to make sure that the healthcare staff did have them. So it's possible. The other possibility was that he really believed that masks for healthy people were not useful. Like he said, it still allows the virus through, so it's not going to protect you. That's what he said. That he really believed this, but then for some reason, after meeting with the Trilateral Commission, changed his tune because of a purpose such as psychological operations, to have everyone wearing masks so it reminds people to be scared. Or maybe they just figured it was better that everyone wears masks so that if there's sick people walking around, they're going to be less likely to transmit the virus. I don't know, but in any case, he did flip-flop on the mask issue. Now, a bigger issue, this one really pisses me off because, I, along with everyone else, suffered through, the clampdown on free discussion as a result of, the decisions that the American government took on their stance, the decisions that they had the media take on what the official stance was going to be. Okay, now a bigger issue was that of this virus being natural versus man-made. Now, in the early days of this pandemic, well, actually, one of the first things people noticed was like, well, hey, yeah, the government of China says it's from the wet market, but there's this virology lab just a few miles away, so how do you know it didn't come from there? But this was quickly called a crazy idea, a conspiracy theory. It was shut down in the media. Oh, come on. It wasn't from the biosafety lab. It was from the wet market, from the bats. The reason for that was that that's what the Chinese Communist Party had told us, as if they would be the best and most honest source of information. So the Western media had to just cast aside any doubts that the Chinese Communist Party might be trying to cover something up and just accept that it came from the wet market. Funny thing about that is that although that was the official narrative for a while, later that changed. Well, no, it wasn't the wet market. It was some other bats in a cave somewhere. So if you had shared stuff about the wet market, now you were flagged as spreading false news because it was an evolving story and we're not allowed to talk about it as an evolving story. Whatever you said, it becomes fake news sooner or later. But whatever the case was, if you said it came from a lab, for sure, you're guilty of spreading fake news. Well, until recently. Now they're reconsidering that, yeah, maybe it really did come from a lab. And apparently, Anthony Fauci had known early on that that was definitely a possibility. Dr. Fauci's Leak 2020 emails reveal knowledge of lab leak theory. So what transpired was that Dr. Fauci was warned by some prominent virologists that it looked like this thing could be man-made. Actually, one of them had pointed out that the thing was that on first glance, it doesn't look man-made, but if you look very closely at the sequences to see some of the features, then you'll see that they potentially look engineered. Dr. Christian Anderson remarked that the viral genome was inconsistent with expectations from evolutionary theory. After that, Anderson later went on to deny any type of lab-based scenario as plausible in a scientific paper he had authored on the subject in the prestigious journal Nature. So even the scientists who first suspected strongly that it was lab-made then went on to deny it in prominent publications. He wasn't the only one. There were also scientists from India who brought this up. You know, very early on, there were some people, I think it was in India, who had done a study where they analyzed the genome of the coronavirus, and they said that there were 4 genes in there that didn't look like they belonged to a coronavirus. They looked like they came from HIV. Now, this study has since been retracted. I'm just bringing it up to point out that there was this connection or this mention of HIV starting very early on. Well, that study was retracted, but apparently they weren't the only ones seeing some kind of connection with HIV. And in fact, Anthony Fauci had received a message from someone called Adam Gertner in March of 2020, who actually described how this virus could be created in a lab. He says, this is how the virus was created. Well, how does he know? He says, intervirion fusion HIV Luke, whatever this is, was mixed with 1,000 milligrams of P24 of HIV GFP particles incorporating ASLVA envelope and all this other stuff. But the point was that so early on in the game, someone here was writing to him, telling him this is actually how it could be made, and HIV comes up. But still, all we heard was that any ideas of lab origins were just a conspiracy theory. Well, then recently, it turned out that the very first people in China who got sick with COVID-like symptoms were actually 3 people who worked in that Wuhan virology lab. So it looked like maybe actually it did come from the lab. And so that's why they started reconsidering this hypothesis. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. It makes more sense than, you know, that it came from bats, especially now that they deny that it was the wet market after all. So where did it come from? We still don't know. I mean, the first cases were in this lab. Now, there's another thing. It was, I think in 2015, an Italian TV show had done a segment on a lab in China that was experimenting specifically with bat coronaviruses to make them, you know, to change them, to engineer them, to make them so they could infect humans. And the issue was brought up that, well, this is dangerous and there should be a moratorium. But they said that that moratorium was not going to happen. So back in 2015, and this isn't the COVID-19 virus that we're talking about, but it was out there already in the media that they were doing these experiments with coronaviruses. And the researcher from this institute, she was also confronted with the question of, well, isn't this very dangerous, what you're doing? And she said, well, there are definitely risks involved, but more importantly, there are benefits to it. And she seemed to think that the benefits outweighed the risks. Now, if this thing came from a lab, then clearly the risks outweighed the benefits, because look at what happened to the whole world. Practically the whole world was shut down because of something that might have leaked from a lab. Anthony Fauci was well aware of this kind of stuff going on, and this is what he called gain-of-function research. He knew that they were taking viruses from animals, modifying them so they could infect humans. And then what for? Well, apparently it was revealed that the only way a vaccine could be made would be if they took a virus, engineered it so that it could infect humans, and then took the spike protein and made a vaccine from that. They said they would never be able to make a vaccine from a naturally occurring coronavirus. So the purpose of this research was, in case it jumps species, in case a coronavirus jumps species and becomes deadly to humans, if you've reverse engineered a virus and you've taken the spike protein and you're able to make a vaccine, then when it happens naturally, you'll have a vaccine that you can use, or you'll be able to use that as a starting point to make a vaccine. Supposedly, that's the reason they were doing this. Anyway, none of us were allowed to know anything about this, and we were supposed to just accept that this just happened naturally, and the only solution was the vaccines that they have. Now, it turns out in the emails, though, they'd also discussed other treatments, and that was another question. From the very beginning, everyone was always told there is no treatment and there's nothing that can be done. There are no existing drugs out there that could be repurposed. There's just nothing. We're going to have to wait for a vaccine. But it does look like the FDA certainly did not make any effort to run any kind of large-scale trials that would prove or disprove the effectiveness of some existing drug. And actually, conveniently, it was only because of that they were able to then give emergency authorization to the vaccines, because if there had been an alternative, they wouldn't have been able to do that. So, kind of funny how that worked out. Anyway, these emails are a kind of a big soup of suspicious things, and I mean, I don't want to make accusations here, but it certainly seems like he was in the know from the beginning on a lot of things that the rest of us weren't, and that we were not even allowed to discuss. Certainly the media suppressed all these other things. It's like you can really see how they just push one narrative. We all have to go along with it. Then it turns out actually Anthony Fauci knew all these other things from the beginning, and no one was ever told about lab origins or possible treatments. We weren't allowed to even talk about those kind of things. So the question is, why? Why was there no information about this? Why was there no discussion allowed? Was it done on purpose? We don't know. Whose interest did it serve? I guess you can answer that one in the comments. So basically that's what happened. These emails came out, and it's really looking suspicious for Anthony Fauci, although some of the media is framing it like, oh, wow, look at all the pressure and imagine what was on his shoulders. But I don't think that exonerates him from pushing such a specific narrative when he knew that there were other things going on. There were other alternatives. Was he just trying to make sure that nobody got scared? Anyway, I've been pretty fed up with this whole topic, because the thing that bothers me the most is the fact that we're not allowed to talk about it. I mean, there are scientists here on YouTube who have to give like huge disclaimers before they're even allowed to mention certain kinds of drugs, and they're scientists. So like, what kind of climate are we living in here? Is this Canada and America, or, you know, it's like we're turning into something else, something that I don't want to be part of. So that's the part that really burns my ass. But the emails are there if you want to look through them, and that's it. I hope that information is useful to you. And so thanks again for liking the video and leaving me a comment. Thank you for checking out the link. And thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.